Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're here to plunge into some complex source material, find those surprising nuggets of knowledge you need. Today, it's a pretty challenging one, a powerful exploration, really. We're doing a theological deep dive into suffering. We're drawing heavily from the book of Job, specifically chapters 9 and 10.
Yeah, and the core theme, the thread running through our source material, is this idea they call the offering of suffering.
Which sounds counterintuitive, right? Offering suffering, it's about reframing pain, loss, confusion.
Exactly. Our mission isn't just, looking at an ancient text in isolation. It's about weaving it together with modern, sometimes really extreme examples of hardship. We're looking for that shift, that mechanism where faith lets you move past why me?
And start seeing suffering itself as valuable, as a contribution.
Precisely, a unique offering.
Wow. Okay, that's a total paradigm shift. From something passive you just endured to something active, something you can offer.
Yeah.
All right, let's start with Job then. The source text throws us right into his crisis in those chapters, focusing on three really deep questions. What was he actually grappling with?
Well, the sources paint him as a truly righteous man. I mean, genuinely good, but utterly devastated. His first question really shows his desperation for, validation. How can I ever be proven righteous before God?
So he's not denying he was righteous, but his current state makes it look like a lie.
Kinda, yeah. Like his suffering just negates everything he stood for and makes a mockery of his past life.
Okay, and the second question, it sounds almost like a legal challenge.
It does. Must I only confront God in a courtroom? He's demanding accountability, an answer. He feels entitled to one.
He wants his day in court, so to speak.
Right, which leads directly into that ultimate cry of despair. Why was I even born?
Oh, that's heavy.
It is, and the sources link these three questions. Job feels like, look, I did my part, I was righteous. But if God won't step in, if there's no vindication, no proofs...
And my whole life, my virtue, it was all for nothing.
Exactly. It feels meaningless to him.
Okay, but here's where the background info from our research comes in. The stuff Job himself just didn't know.
Right. He couldn't see the bigger picture, the divine drama playing out off stage.
The sources talk about him being used as a weapon in a spiritual war.
That's the language they use, yeah. A key strategic asset in this cosmic battle against the adversary, the devil.
Being God's weapon. Is that supposed to be comforting? Doesn't that just add pressure? Why would knowing that lead to patience?
Well, think about the kind of weapon. It's not about fighting aggressively, it's about testimony, silent endurance. Job's faith, despite the agony, that was the weapon, that was the proof.
I see.
So the insight is his complaints, his anguish, it all comes from not knowing the purpose. If he had known that just hanging on, just enduring, was his crucial role in defeating the devil, the sources argue he probably would have waited patiently. The real struggle wasn't just the pain, it was the feeling that the pain was pointless.
Knowing the why helps you bear the how. Okay. That struggle, that not knowing the why, it leads us right into the next big analogy the research uses. We shift from Job to the New Testament.
Yeah, they draw a parallel between Job's suffering and Mary anointing Jesus with that incredibly expensive perfume. Remember that story?
Oh yeah, the disciples were pretty upset about that.
And were furious. They saw this perfume worth, more than 30 pieces of silver.
Which was a fortune back then. A worker's yearly wage, maybe.
Easily. A huge amount. And they just saw it being poured out, wasted in their eyes.
They were thinking practically. We could have sold that and given the money to the poor.
Exactly, calculating the utility. But the source material pulls out this principle. Nothing given to God in genuine faith and love is ever wasted. Mary's perfume, the actual stuff, it vanished 2,000 years ago. But the meaning behind it, that depth of reverence, that act of worship.
That still resonates. It still helps people understand devotion today.
Right. The physical value disappeared, but the spiritual offering, that endured.
Okay, so how does that connect back to Job? He didn't have any expensive perfume. He had nothing.
Well, that's the point. He was broke, sick, grieving. He had literally nothing left except the most personal thing he possessed, his suffering. And he offered that in faith, despite his confusion and pain. And according to the source, that offering was precisely what God needed in that spiritual battle. It silenced the devil. It proved Job's faith was real, not just transactional.
So his agony wasn't just punishment. It was transformed into a contribution, a powerful one.
Exactly.
Wow. That idea, pain as a contribution, that feels really alien in our modern world, doesn't it?
Completely. Which is why the research shifts gears here, looking at modern life. Our baseline expectations are just so different.
You mean because we're generally more comfortable?
Yeah, the contrast is huge.
Yeah.
Think about places with, reliable electricity, clean water, maybe advanced healthcare systems. The source specifically mentions Taiwan's national health insurance as an example. Universal coverage, high convenience.
We kind of take those things for granted. Maybe see them as entitlements.
That's the potential pitfall, yeah.
No.
Not the comfort itself, but the expectation that life should always be comfortable, that we're somehow shielded from real deep hardship.
And when that shield breaks, when something happens that can't be easily fixed,
Then the reaction described is often, questioning, complaining, doubting God, losing faith, because we don't have a framework for dealing with suffering that medicine or policy can't immediately solve. We expect a fix.
we lack that frame of reference for true desperation sometimes.
Which is why the source material brings in this really intense missionary story. It's meant to give us that frame of reference.
Right, the Aka tribe story from Southeast Asia, maybe 20 years ago. This definitely takes us beyond everyday complaints.
Oh, absolutely. This is a serious perspective check. So in the traditional Aka culture back then, twins weren't seen as a double blessing.
No, it was the opposite, right? A bad omen.
A very bad omen. They were considered a direct sign of the devil.
Which led to, I remember reading this, a truly horrific tradition.
Yes. Unbelievably tragic. The tradition demanded the twins had to be killed, often by, the source mentions using a hot poker in their mouths. It was rooted in deep cultural fear.
Just awful. But the story focuses on one young couple.
A young Aka couple who refused. They just couldn't do it. They defied this deeply ingrained cultural terror and pleaded for help from some missionaries living nearby.
That refusal must have cost them everything.
Tremendously. It was an enormous sacrifice. To save their babies, the source says they had to flee their village, their families, their entire community. They walked for 3 days straight just to get away, to escape the persecution.
Wow. An act of faith, defiance, costing them their whole world.
Absolutely. And what happened? What was the result of that offering, that sacrifice?
They survived.
They did. That family became the very first Christian family in that whole region, and the twins. They grew up healthy.
Incredible.
The source uses this to show that real suffering, faced with active faith, it doesn't just vanish, but it can lead to profound, lasting change. Change that shapes history, not just personal comfort levels.
That Aka story, where just surviving means leaving everything behind.
Yeah.
That really puts things in perspective, though the research kind of uses it as a benchmark for us, doesn't it? For you, the listener. To compare that kind of life or death struggle to our own, especially when we have access to things like good doctors or social safety nets.
Right. And the point isn't to say your pain isn't real or valid. Of course it is. It's about gaining perspective that might naturally lead to gratitude. When you think about what others endure, those lacking the absolute basics we assume are normal, it can shift your default setting away from just complaining, maybe towards appreciating the resources and support you do have.
And this all leads back to that big shift in perspective the source is pushing for. Instead of getting stuck on, why me? Why is this happening?
Yeah. Learning to pivot the question, the suggestion is try asking, God, why do you love me so much?
That's unexpected. How does that help?
It forces you to shift focus away from the cause of the pain, which, let's face it, often stays a mystery, just like for Job, and towards the certainty of God's presence, God's grace, that relationship, even in the middle of the mess.
I'm focusing on the relationship, not the reason. Okay, so this seems like the right moment for some personal reflection. The source actually gives 3 specific questions for listeners, for you to chew on right now.
Right. First one, think about your own life. What 3 big questions are you wrestling with right now about life, about God? What are your personal job questions?
Okay. Second, can you remember a time looking back when you were totally in the dark, didn't understand God's plan at all, felt lost, but then later, maybe months or even years down the road, you saw things click, saw a positive outcome, or at least understood the why a bit better?
Yeah, that hindsight thing. And the third question, thinking about Mary's perfume or Job offering his suffering. What unusual or unique thing can you offer? It might not be money or obvious talent. Maybe it's part of your struggle, your circumstance, your unique difficulty. Can that be presented as an offering, not just a burden?
That idea again, transforming burden into offering, that really is the anchor of this whole deep dive.
Absolutely, that's the core takeaway. Suffering, when you approach it with faith, when you frame it consciously as an offering, it stops being just a random, meaningless curse. It becomes something powerful, a spiritual act with lasting significance. It's not just happening to you, it becomes something you actively do, spiritually speaking.
And as we wrap up, The source material really emphasizes relying on faith through it all, trusting in that divine companionship, that love, even in the darkest times, the valley of the shadow of death, as the psalm says.
Right. And the point isn't that the pain magically vanishes. It often doesn't. But there's hope offered through, as the research puts it, the presence of the resurrected divine. So maybe the final thought to leave you with is this. Think about the difference between trusting the outcome, trusting that everything will eventually be okay, versus trusting the presence, trusting that God is with you during the struggle, regardless of the outcome.
Trusting the presence, transforming the pain. That's a deep one, a really necessary deep dive today. Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.